if you're looking at the criteria, going back to that again and just taking attendance, can we use poor attendance as a criteria?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. In a recent selection criteria, I saw performance criteria used very effectively, whereby people said, this is how you've been performing. Of people of equal status in the organisation,
Sure.
This is how you've all been performing over the last while. We've all agreed that you've all signed off on it. Yeah. It's transparent, it's objective, and we're now going to use that to select.
That's provided you have a good performance management system in the first place.
Well, put the emphasis.
Absolutely. Back to that.
But I think you said signed off on that, Frank. That means that
an individual signs off on their own performance evaluation.
Right. So when they signed off on their own performance,
over the last 5 years, they've been on a performance evaluation system. Every year they sign off and it's agreed.
But you just can't go up and say, I don't think you're doing very well, so you're
done. Well, you can, but with great difficulty.
You can try it.
That's what brings you down to the forecourts where you make your money, right?
But I think, Peter, just something that Frank has said there, just to bring it up and highlight it, is that if you're using something like attendance records or performance management, it must be consistently applied across all of the people who have been looked at. So you can't just, as some employers often feel is the desire to do, take somebody's poor attendance and use it as a trigger. Yeah. You have to look at it consistently across the group of people who are affected in those jobs.
So you just can't pick you out and say your attendance.
You'd love to do that, I know, but you can't.
We go back to the criteria of behaving reasonably at all times.
Yeah, okay. The one here is a very interesting one here. We touched on it a couple of weeks ago, and we said we'd talk about it today, which was, if an employee is pregnant in the real world, does it offer more protection to that individual in the redundancy round?
Yes.
Correct.
Right. Let me just say one thing. It may not be the most legalistic answer to this question.
Frank, you're alive.
Treat any pregnant employee with the greatest consideration and great care.
But you would anyway.
Yeah, but even if you're not inclined to do, make sure you do for your own self-preservation, because any of your motives about making a pregnant employee redundant can be misinterpreted and can be challenged. So
before we came on here, I challenged John on this, and I said, look, if you have a person there that, and this is a real life world which this person is asking us. You have somebody here who's pregnant and a person who's, say, a man. That's pretty much even Stevens. What do you do?
In terms of selection?
Yeah.
Well, again, you've got to go back to what we're saying. I mean, you're obliged to behave reasonably, and you must have criteria for your selection. I mean, it can't make.
But you're saying to me,
I'm just saying, over and above your legal minimum.
Yeah.
Exercise great care.
Absolutely, as a practical advice. Yeah. And I mean, just to take that a step further, when you're on maternity leave, you cannot be made redundant. Is that correct?
Cannot be made redundant.
You can't resign on
that's important.
You know, you can't resign until you're due back and the date you're back.
The whole curiously, the law treats pregnancy as sickness.
Okay.
Over and above, and you know, there's another protection for everybody who's pregnant.
That's probably pretty right too. Okay, so moving on, those a case study more or less came in to me during the week to make sure to see would we actually deal with it here, which was an organisation that is in difficulty, and the staff have come together, and rather than having a redundancy plan, they put forward the proposal that they would all take a pay cut. There are 3 or 4 people who will not agree with this and holding back the whole lot. Now, how do you deal with them, and can they be made redundant?
Very good point.
That's a real live scenario that's out there. Frank?
Well, there's no straight answer to that. How would you go about that? Again, you'd have to go back to looking at, is it a unionised environment, is it a non-unionised environment? If it's a unionised environment, there are criteria there. There's a system in place, there's a collective agreement, there's a disputes procedure, so that if proposals are put to the workforce as a whole, and they all agree that they're all going to take a pay cut to protect jobs, and some people say they're not ready to sign up to that, you would have a reasonable case to say, well, in that case we don't have a job for you at the level of pay and conditions, and we're going to make you redundant. Now, you're open to challenge, but that's a case you can defend quite reasonably.
Yeah, and just thinking of it from the point of view of pay reduction, I'm aware of somebody at the moment, 200-person company, where they effected a pay deduction and negotiated it through, but one person has taken them now to the Rights Commissioner because they're refusing to take the pay cut. So it'll be just interesting to see where they get to at the end of that process, but just one person. But I think in general, if you offer to employees, I think John mentioned this in one of the previous sessions, the alternative between redundancies or taking a pay cut or other changes, etc. I think you'll find that the majority of employees would accept a pay cut.
Pay cut, yeah. And there is a trend in that
There is a
direction.
trend, yeah.
And go back again to what Martin said at the beginning. Redundancy is about the job not being there. It's not about the individual.
Yeah.
So let's say in an organisation you've got 100 jobs at £100, €100 a week, and you end up make it very simple that cutbacks. You've got 50 jobs at €50 a week. You've got to then look at the criteria as to how you're going to fit the people into those 50 jobs at 50. So there's lots of different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if those people are not willing to accept the €50 a week job, the job for them.
Question that came in here during the week: if we have staff on fixed term contracts, what's the position in making them redundant, and are they entitled to redundancy at the end of their contracts?
I'll go back to the first one of the earlier questions that were asked by somebody who asked, on what basis am I eligible for redundancy? So the first answer is if they don't have a 104-week service. If the contract is not beyond, or the service isn't beyond 104 weeks, they're not entitled to redundancy.
Well, let's say it is.
Well,
and they're on fixed. What's the position if we have staff on fixed term contracts?
Yeah.
What's the position in making them redundant? I presume they're on over 104 weeks.
Yeah.
And are they entitled to redundancy at the end of their contracts?
Yeah, well, again, dependent on the length of the fixed term contract. But let's make it simple and say they have a 5-year fixed term contract, or a 6-year, or whatever else. They've got over the 104-week service. The job that they're doing becomes redundant. There are things you could be doing, like looking at reorganisation. But let's say you've done all the other things about reorganisation, and at the end of the day, you've done all the other bits that are possible, and there's this job here that's no longer there. The answer is yes, they're entitled to redundancy, provided they fulfil the criteria under the Redundancy Payments Acts.
Okay, so if we have staff...
Even when the contract comes to an end, in the normal way, if the job is no longer there, redundancy will also apply, which is something a lot of people don't realise.
They forget about it.
Yeah. If they're over the 104 weeks.
Sorry,
But the other...
One thing I noticed, it's one thing I noticed, particularly, I don't want to get into transfer of undertakings and all that sort of stuff, but you find that contractors or people in the service industry don't cater sufficiently for the fact that they have employees who may be on they might be contracting a service, and at the end of the period they lose the contract. TUPE doesn't apply, and then they have not catered for or built into the contract that they were tendering the accumulated rights of people under the Redundancy Payments Acts.
So just go over that again, Frank.
So let's say I'm in contract cleaning,
right,
and I have 10 or 20 cleaners in an organisation, and they're there for 10 years.
Yes.
At the end of the 10 years, my client terminates the contract.
Yes.
Now, if I haven't been costing, I then have 10 years accumulated rights built up for those people under the Redundancy Payments Acts. To make John's point, once that contract ends, even if I said to them, this contract is only going to be there for 10 years, they're entitled to redundancy.
Right.
Most contractors that I'm aware of don't think about that.
A lot of people don't realise that. Yeah.
And they get caught. And then there's rows. I was involved in a recent row whereby the same women were working in the same building for 10 or 15 years. One contractor lost the job. The new contractor said, we're not taking you on. TUPE didn't apply, and a major row erupted over.
Okay.
They were entitled to the redundancy payments.
Okay.
Just in terms of fixed term, just to come back to that for a second, because I think TUPE is a very big area which may require a separate conversation. Because
just for general managers, TUPE, what's TUPE?
Transfer of Undertakings Directive, which says that if you fulfil the criteria under the directive and you're selling your business or transferring your business, the employees have the right to transfer on a continuous service basis on no less favourable terms and conditions of employment.
Okay.
So if I topic we should come back to it. It's a huge topic.
So, but basically, if I buy a company, I buy the employees as well. And
at the same terms and conditions
that they have, not the terms and conditions that I have here.
No.
And if you are buying, make sure in your due diligence you look at that liability and indeed the pension implications.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been involved in a few due diligences and nobody thought about the pension, and we discovered that the pension arrangements had all been changed.
The black hole.
Within living memory, let's put it that way.
Or the salaries have been doubled just prior to the transfer.
So it's a very important point.
Right, okay.
Well, Peter, just back to the fixed term contract piece, one of the other elements that needs to be considered when you're looking at redundancies is you got to look at your entire labour force to see are there opportunities to mitigate the impact
for redeployment
or your full-time staff, because you might have a core workforce and a casual workforce. So, if you dig into the casual first before the core, what does that mean?
Yes.
And you also need to look at it from the point of view, as Frank said earlier, reasonableness. So if I'm sitting and my post becomes redundant, but John is, a contract person doing a fixed term contract job, Well, surely then, how do you justify fairness in that instance? So it's just